This is News Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Angela Lin. In tonight's top stories, President-elect Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam thanks his supporters after a landslide victory. He'll be inaugurated as Singapore's 9th head of state on the 14th of September. Congratulations pouring in for Mr. Tharman on his election win from Singapore leaders as well as other countries, including the US and India. And also tonight, a new longevity clinic that aims to increase the health span of Singaporeans. It's the first in the world to open in a public hospital. President-elect Tharman Shanmugaratnam says the high margin of victory he garnered was unexpected. He got 70.4% of the votes in a three-cornered fight. Mr. Tharman calls it an expression of Singaporeans' desire for unity and for society and the government to work together in new ways. He was speaking to the media at the end of a Round Island thank you tour. Sherry Locke was there and tells us more.
The day started on a high note for Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who received a resounding welcome at his old stomping ground. Crowds thronged Taman Food Centre to celebrate with him.
These empty cartons used to contain mounds of pineapples, but it was snapped up within 10 minutes by residents eager to greet their former MP turned president-elect. The pineapple has been Mr. Tharman's symbol throughout this entire election campaign, picked for its prosperous symbolism and its familiarity to Singaporeans.
For residents who have known him for years, it's an especially sweet victory.
I always joke with my father that Mr. Tharman actually watched me and grew up since I was a child. We were very, very proud as we have watched, in a way, the figure that watched over us, being able to step up and lead Singapore in the next 6 years.
I'm very proud because he helped a lot of people, to say that, because he's a man who's a very simple man. Whenever you sit down next to him, you sit down, you talk to you as a friendly way.
He also received a warm welcome at other parts of the island. Snaking queues formed wherever he went, full of people eager to get a photo.
I feel excited because we have a new president. Hopefully Singapore will be better after this.
I believe he will be a very good president of Singapore. I mean, knowing that his reputation worldwide as well.
Also feeling optimistic, Mr. Tharman calls his landslide victory an expression of hope and says Singaporeans have been very sensible.
They judge the person. They don't hold it against you because you've been a member of cabinet or member of a political party. And they may even think it's a plus because you've got knowledge, experience, and you come armed with the confidence of knowing that you'll be able to judge on the basis of real knowledge.
Mr. Tharman adds that he has high hopes for his relationship with the Prime Minister.
It'll be a different relationship from before because we're no longer cabinet colleagues, but it'll be a relationship of trust and mutual respect. As you know, I have a high regard for him, and I believe that we will have a very constructive relationship. And you have to remember, as I've said before as well, that when it comes to the international role of the government, the president has to work together with government. The president is not a solo operator. The president represents Singapore, and it's critical that the president and the government have good relations.
He looks forward to learning from current President Halimah Yacob as well.
She has served Singapore remarkably well. I admire her equanimity, her poise, and the dignity with which she's held the presidency. And one of the first things I want to do is to sit down with her and get her thoughts and advice coming from the last 6 years.
But there are still loose ends to tie up. For one, he'll have to review his international appointments and consult the cabinet.
Some of them are clearly in Singapore's interests. Some are midstream and it's good to carry on. So that's something to be evaluated. But from the very start, stated that it's a plus for Singapore that I come with some international standing and networks around the world, which we should try to use.
He adds that he hasn't given much thought to plans for the next 2 weeks, but looks forward to attending the ceremony marking President Halima Yacob's end of term on 13 September and his swearing in the day after.
Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam will be Singapore's 9th head of state. The former senior minister won by a decisive margin. And here's a look at yesterday's election results. 7 in 10 Singaporeans voted for Mr. Tharman. The 66-year-old addressed his supporters last night, saying he plans to use his presidency to advance a future of optimism and solidarity among the people. He added his win in a multiracial election reflects the evolution of Singapore. Claudia Lim with the roundup.
I declare Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam as the candidate duly elected as the President of Singapore.
A dominant showing. Mr. Tharman swept 70.4% of the votes. More than 2.4 million ballots were counted as valid. The final announcement confirmed the sample count result released 2 hours earlier, which was celebrated by throngs of people gathered at Taman Jurong. It's where Mr. Tharman walked the ground over the last 2 decades, building up his supporter base.
I believe that the vote for me and what I stand for is a vote of confidence in Singapore. I believe that. It's a vote of confidence in Singapore. It's a vote of optimism for a future in which we can progress together and support each other as Singaporeans. That has been my platform, and I believe it has received strong endorsement by Singaporeans. So it's not just about me. It's not about me. This is about Singapore and confidence in Singapore. It will have to be a future where we have deeper respect for each other as Singaporeans. It'll have to be a future that ensures that every generation gets the confidence of knowing that we have reserves and we have the backing that will help us in the future, come what may. It has to be a future in which Singapore is never treated as a small country, just another small country, a future where we are taken seriously in the world, we are a partner of choice, and where we can project our voice of reason internationally in an endangered world. And it has to be a future where we deepen our solidarity as Singaporeans, regardless of our differences, regardless of our backgrounds. We deepen our solidarity as Singaporeans. It is what I've stood for. I believe it is what Singaporeans stand for. And this vote is really a vote of confidence in that future.
Mr. Tharman will take over from President Halima Yacob, who entered office following an election reserved for the Malay community in 2017. The system of reserved elections was put in place to ensure minority candidates have the chance to be elected president in Singapore. The country has a Chinese majority. And when asked if Singapore still needs a system of reserved elections, Mr. Tharman said,
"This was a contested election with a multiracial slate. I've always said that race is never absent in politics anywhere in the world, or even in an apolitical election of this case. Race is never absent, but it is not the only factor. It is not the only factor. And I think with each half-decade, Singapore is changing and evolving, and I hope that my being elected president is seen as another milestone in that process of evolution."
He later reiterated on social media that Singapore's future must be one of deeper respect, regardless of backgrounds and educational achievements, of closer interactions between different faiths and cultures so as to deepen the country's multicultural identity, and amid cheers quoting from the national anthem, which calls for progress. He departed, all smiles.
Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong congratulated President-elect Tharman Shanmugaratnam right after the resounding victory at the polls. The Prime Minister's office has published his statement on the presidential election. Here it is in full. Mr. Lee says Singaporeans have chosen Mr. Tharman to be the next president by a decisive margin. He says as head of state, Mr. Tharman will represent Singapore at home and abroad and exercise custodial powers, including over the reserves and key appointments. Mr. Lee also thanked the three candidates for putting themselves forward in this presidential election. He is happy that Singaporeans have been able to exercise the right to vote for their next president and to focus on what the elected president is about. He says in this election, both voters and candidates have shown a greater understanding of the roles and duties of the president, and it bodes well for Singapore. Mr. Lee says Mr. Tharman has a long and distinguished record of public service, and he has every confidence that Mr. Tharman will carry out his duties as president with distinction. Mr. Lee says he has called Mr. Tharman to congratulate him on the win and to assure him of his government's full cooperation. He says Mr. Tharman has also declared his intention to work closely with the government. PM Lee adds that as head of state, the president has to be a unifying figure that all Singaporeans can look up to and identify with. He must exercise his custodial powers under the Constitution wisely, bringing to bear his experience and independent judgment. Internationally, representing Singapore, he must fly our flag high. The Prime Minister also thanked the election officials for their hard work that has ensured a smooth and successful presidential election. He also thanks all voters, both here and abroad, for doing their civic duty. PM Lee says now that the election is over, people should come together again as Singaporeans to tackle the challenges ahead and build a stronger and more united nation. Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong describes the outcome of the presidential election as a vote of confidence in the country's future. He says it augurs well for the stability and unity that Singaporeans want for the country. Mr. Wong says he looks forward to Mr. Tharman's service as the head of state to strengthen the solidarity, bring out the best in people, and represent Singapore's interests abroad. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat says Mr. Tharman's wealth of experience in public service puts him in good position to safeguard public sector appointments and the reserves. Mr. Heng says he trusts that Mr. Tharman will do well in unifying Singaporeans and project the country abroad. He wishes the President-elect great success in working with the government and Singaporeans to take the country forward. Well, Mr. Tharman also received well wishes from abroad, including the United States, India and Canada. The US State Department says the country looks forward to working closely with Mr. Tharman and the people of Singapore. It's hoping to further strengthen the enduring bonds of friendship and cooperation between both nations. The US has also extended its gratitude to Madam Halima Yaacob for her contributions to the bilateral ties during her tenure as Singapore's first female president. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also congratulated Mr. Tharman, saying he looks forward to working with him to further strengthen the India-Singapore strategic partnership. The Canadian Embassy says it looks forward to working with Mr. Tharman to strengthen bilateral ties. It also thanked Madam Halima for her service. Now, after putting up a strong fight during the presidential campaign, candidates Mr. Ng Kok Song and Mr. Tan Kin Lian were gracious in defeat. The two men congratulated President-elect Tharman Shanmugaratnam for the win shortly after the sample count results were announced last night. Mr. Ng Kok Song received 15.72% of valid votes. The former GIC investment chief was the first to concede, doing so after the sample count was announced. Mr. Ng said he spoke to Mr. Tharman on the phone and wished him success in the presidency. He said he's very glad Mr. Tharman has earned a mandate from the people.
I said that my number one goal was to ensure that the people of Singapore has redeemed their right to vote in this presidential election. I think I have accomplished that goal because the presidential election did take place today. I also said that Mr. Tharman had mentioned that he would like to have a contest so that when he is elected, he has a mandate from the people of Singapore. I'm delighted for him.
Second-time presidential candidate Mr. Tan Kin Lian also wished Mr. Tharman well. He received 13.88% of the votes. He said he expected himself to perform much better and will reflect on why things didn't work out.
I will now heed the advice of my family to take life easy and live a normal life. I will spend more time with my grandchildren. In my free time, I will continue to do my part in voicing the hardship and aspirations of the people through other channels.
And still ahead of news tonight, parents meet with the staff of the Kinderland preschool in Woodlands over the alleged child abuse cases. CNA finds out if their concerns have been addressed. Plus, a call for the nation to stay prepared to ensure food security to overcome any future challenges, come what may.
My Mitsubishi Electric StarMax aircon saves me energy and money. It's easy to clean and is so quiet.
A clinic that aims to increase the healthy years of Singaporeans by 3 years has opened its doors. The Healthy Longevity Clinic at Alexandra Hospital is the first of its kind in the world involving a public hospital. Here, healthcare teams can examine a patient's health data and develop personalized health plans. This could include diet recommendations, exercise, or medication. The service is for patients between 35 and 70 years old who have one chronic disease. It's part of efforts to focus on preventive care as Singapore's population ages.
It's not just increasing the number of years we live, it's a number of healthier years that we want our citizens to live in, but we want also to narrow that gap so that we have less years in ill health.
More than 30 parents showed up at a Woodlands preschool today, demanding answers amid alleged child abuse cases at the centre. At least 6 students withdrew from the school, despite staff assuring parents that security cameras will be installed and a new principal will take charge on Monday. Clara Lee with more.
This happened at Kinderland Preschool at Woodlands Mart. They are hard to watch and even harder for parents of these kids.
We only been informed of the forcefully drinking water, but not the case about the kid being spanked on the backside. I only get to know it when I saw the videos online.
The teacher involved has since been charged with ill-treating a child and fired. The principal was also removed. A group of parents met with Kinderland staff for a closed-door discussion at the school. CNA spoke to some of them to find out if their concerns have been addressed.
They have started installing the CCTV, but it's need to be done more because there's a place that the CCTV is not can be captured.
I fear for my child's safety in this case because I'm just not trusting the school. It's difficult to trust the school again. Yeah, so I will see how the new principal does the job. They have a new replacement principal.
Parents tell CNA that there were similar incidents over the past 2 years, only to be swept under the rug.
Since 2021, my son has been abused. I can give you guys the photos afterwards as well. And I have a 23-minute video of how the principal, the one who got suspended, how she always downplayed the situation and pushed the blame back to us as parents.
According to sources, it was a former kindergarten teacher who took those videos. The school has since reiterated its policy to disallow staff from using personal devices during lesson hours, unless it's an emergency. They say it's to protect the privacy of the children. When asked if this ban will instead deter whistleblowers, Kinderland says it has always encouraged staff to report such incidents, and it wants teachers to alert the school if they spot anything amiss. Still, it acknowledged the gaps in its communication. In the meantime, the preschool says it will step up on checks and review their screening process for new hires.
And coming up on News Tonight, Singapore's factory output posts a slower contraction for the 4th month in a row, pointing to a sign of recovery. And a new guide for foster parents to help them build on their abilities and better care for their kids.
Weather Report brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric.
Singapore's manufacturing activity posted a slower contraction in August, with the Purchasing Managers Index inching up to 49.9 points. Now, a reading below 50 indicates contraction in the sector. The Singapore Institute of Purchasing and Materials Management says the trend of slower contractions has been developing since May. This suggests a possible recovery of the sector despite global uncertainties. The higher figure is mainly due to improvement in the inventory, exports and factories receiving more orders. The electronics sector improved marginally, although it logged its 13th month of contraction. Manufacturing sector employment remains weak, shrinking for the 7th consecutive month. Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong says while recent disruptions in global food supplies may have stabilized, Singapore must be prepared for new challenges. He adds that as a small country reliant on imports for food, Singapore will need to adapt to this new reality together.
In the end, as a small, open city-state with no natural resources, Singapore will always be vulnerable to global shocks and disruptions. But if our history has taught us anything, it is that we can overcome our challenges and limitations through our collective wit, effort and ingenuity.
Mr. Wong was speaking at the launch of the Feeding Our Future exhibition. He joined Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu for a tour of the exhibits, which showcase the country's efforts towards sustainable food security. Highlights of the 4-day event include an overview of Lim Chu Kang as the country's future agri-food production hub. Foster parents can now look to a new guide to help them identify and build on their fostering abilities. The Social and Family Development Ministry hopes the resource can help foster parents to improve care and overcome challenges.
This new strengths-based approach will help foster parents build confidence and motivation and support them to handle challenging situations with a positive mindset.
The guide was at this year's Fostering Open House. It identifies strengths across 4 domains, from providing a safe home environment to meeting children's medical, developmental and educational needs. One foster parent hopes it can help them nurture their foster children to their fullest potential.
We really want to use the guide to actually see how we can better become foster parents to our girls, and to better develop their development and their progress.
And that's News Tonight. Thank you for watching and join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.